Okay, so technically we're live right now, but we'll wait for a couple of more people to join.
Okay.
And then we'll get started. So just give it about a few more minutes and then we'll get started.
Okay, sounds good. I'll be right back. 1 second.
Okay. Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait for a few more participants and then we'll get started.
Sorry.
I think we can get started in a few more minutes. It's 11:08. Let's get started by 11:10. I know we had one person come in and then head back out. So we'll start at 11:10. 2 minutes.
Okay.
You can put yourself on mute as well in the meanwhile. And for anyone who's joined, thank you for joining. We're going to get started in just 2 more minutes to make sure we allow for more participants to join. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm excited to introduce you to Priyanka Mara. Priya is a practicing architect in San Francisco at a prestigious architecture firm. She has had the pleasure of working on a variety of projects all over the world, ranging from high-profile Apple stores to a modest single-family home for a structural engineer. She loves what she does and is here to share her personal journey to getting to where she is today. And I know that we are going to learn a lot from Priyanka or Miss Mara today regarding how to carve your own path. So Miss Mara, Priya, you can take it from here. Oh, you're still on mute.
Sorry. You hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, so as Hathel said, my name is Priya. I'm an architect, and I've been practicing architecture for about 11 and a half years now. I am from upstate New York, and when I graduated from college from RPI, I moved to San Francisco. So I've gotten to work on some pretty amazing projects in the past 11 years. And I thought I would just talk a little bit about how I got to where I am today, as Hathel said. So I just want to start with, this age-old question that you get from the age that you can speak to the age that you're supposed to figure out what you want to do with your life. What do you want to be when you grow up? I think I've been asked this, I don't know, hundreds of times probably in my life. And it's kind of funny because I actually thought I was going to be a doctor when I grew up, when I was little, because my dad was a doctor and I had a couple family members who were doctors, and it's a pretty noble profession. But then I got to high school and I realized it wasn't really for me. It just didn't fit right. And I was pretty confused. I was pretty confused about what to do with my life. I was trying to figure out if I wanted to be a teacher, or if I did just want to be an architect. I didn't have that many thoughts about what I could be, and so I thought I would maybe just go to college without having a major figured out. But then I started to think about what are my strengths and what is my thought process on things. And I was thinking about how I'm actually a pretty creative person. I like to think about things pretty technically as well. So I'd like to think that I like to use both parts of my brain. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not really sure if that's medically accurate, but anyway, that's what I've heard. So I actually didn't know a single architect growing up. It's actually was a very foreign concept to me. No family members or family friends or anybody really ever talked to me about architecture. And then the funniest thing happened when I was in high school. It's actually kind of ridiculous how this happened. I was just watching TV and a commercial came on, and in this commercial, I don't even remember what the commercial was for. There was this woman, she was wearing a suit, she looked very professional. She had a hard hat on and she had a roll of drawings in her hands. And she just looked like she was in charge and she knew what she was doing and she looked confident. And somehow that image just clicked for me. And I was like, I want to do what she's doing. Something about that combination of hard hat, drawings, and just her like can-do attitude just really spoke to me somehow. So, like I said, I didn't really know any architects, but I started to think about this a lot, and I started to think about like how I would get to this point. So, the truth is, I actually didn't have much support from my family. My parents are both Indian, and Indian culture doesn't always support and encourage creative pursuits. They also just had it in their mind that I would be a doctor because I'd been telling them this since I was a kid. And so I kind of needed to prove to them that this was my dream, that this was something that I really wanted to do. And so the way we worked it out is basically I had to keep my other options open as well. So I needed to apply for multiple colleges to multiple programs and not just lock myself into doing architecture. So the first step was just doing a ton of research because I myself didn't know that much about the profession. And so I needed to know, even for myself, like what does architecture mean in terms of a lifestyle, in terms of an everyday kind of like, what do you do day to day? So first thing I did was I called colleges, mostly local colleges with architecture programs, because this was the day. I mean, This is about 11 years, or no, sorry, about 16 years ago, 17 years ago, and this was the way to find out things. So now you have the internet and everything, but at the time I was calling colleges with architecture programs. I was doing research about which schools had good programs. And then I also found, I needed to just utilize my resources. In upstate New York, I didn't have things like any drafting classes. I didn't have any like architecture mentoring programs. So I ended up calling a local vocational college and just talking to them about it. And they were incredibly helpful. The woman there, she basically hooked me up with a local architect to shadow for a day. So they were able to just basically pair me up with this architecture firm. And so shadowing, my day of shadowing was basically like following this architect around for a full day and seeing what he did in his day. So it was the first time I ever had stepped foot into an architecture office. It was the first time I ever saw a drawing set, any of this stuff. It was incredibly new to me, but to be perfectly honest, like the more I learned, the more my passion for it grew, the more I could just imagine this is what I want to do. So yeah, the more I learned, the more my passion grew, as you can read. But I also wanted to be realistic, and I learned about the negatives as well. So to be an architect, it's a pretty arduous path. So you have to do 5 years of college for a professional degree, so a bachelor's of architecture. Or another path is you can do 4 years of an undergrad degree, so like bachelor's of arts in architecture or bachelor's of science in architecture. And then you have to pair it with a 2 to 3 year professional program, like a master's program. So those are two options for education. And then after you graduate, you need to have about 3 years of experience as an intern. So this is logging hours and keeping track of all the things that you've been learning. And the main reason for this is to get a variety of experience under you. And then you can either do it concurrently or afterwards, depends on the state. There are 7 exams to take. And each state has slightly different requirements for all of these things. But like California, for instance, has an 8th additional exam. But it all depends on the jurisdiction you're in. Anyway, so generally it is a lot of steps. It's many years of hard work. And then I also learned about the money. So architects don't make as much as you think. On TV and in movies, you really see like architects living in these really cool, amazing houses, and they just seem to have no issues with money. But the reality is, architects don't make as much as like lawyers or doctors. But you can make a comfortable salary, but it also depends on your situation. So at the time, I was a romantic. I was in high school, and I didn't really think about money in that sense for my own supporting myself, I guess. And I didn't think that in order to be happy, I had to be rich. And I still don't think that. But I know that it's important that you have money to sustain yourself. And, it's kind of interesting, even though my parents are both Indian and come from a pretty traditional background, my dad, he very much supported the idea that I would never have to be dependent upon a husband financially or any family financially. He very much wanted me to make sure that I'd have the ability to be economically dependent. So I needed to support myself. I still think about that, even though I currently have a husband, and said that in a weird way. Anyway, so moving on. When it came time to apply for college, I had to, like I said, apply to multiple programs to appease my family, and I had to decide on those programs, and I had to decide on what path I wanted to take in the different options. So I visited a lot of colleges and tried to get a sense of what was the right fit. There's some colleges where I'd step onto the campus and just see how like artsy they were. And I just realized that that's not for me. Even though I'm a creative person, it was too open-ended and I needed more structure. One of the things that you need to do when you apply to architecture school for most schools is you need to submit a portfolio of original work. Schools really want to just see how you think creatively. And so this is, again, was very new to me. And so I sought help from teachers in high school, like my art teacher, and I put a portfolio together. And additionally, I got pretty lucky where Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute was doing, this is a college that was just an hour and a half away from my parents. They were doing portfolio reviews with high school students. So I actually sat down with a professor there and I got great feedback. And I did this 2 years in a row, the year that I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and then the year where I was trying to actually spruce up my portfolio and make sure that it was okay, acceptable. And then eventually, after applying to colleges and finally convincing my parents, like, this isn't an itch that's gonna scratch, that I'm gonna scratch and gonna go away. This is like it. I want to be an architect. I decided on RPI. They have a 5-year program, and I found that it was kind of the right balance of reputation and location, not too far from my parents and not too close either. And also, in some ways, affordability, because I was pretty lucky in high school in that I got a scholarship. I was awarded a scholarship through my high school from RPI. It wasn't a full ride or anything like that, but it helped significantly. So I, when I started or when I accepted, I actually applied for an additional scholarship after I had accepted. I think the important takeaway for me for that time was really that because I worked hard in high school, I not only got into this really great school, I was able to get like some financial help through scholarships, and I think that's actually really important. Anyways, so then when I started college, it was really different. It's pretty intense, actually. I jumped in with both feet. I went in for my bachelor's of architecture. It's a 5-year program, and from the very first year, you start studios, you start doing pinups and presentations of your creative ideas, and you have these long projects, and there's a lot of expectations and a lot of hard work. So it was, but the reality was, in school, I was constantly reminded that there was nothing else I'd rather do, that this is what I wanted to do. And I wasn't the most talented or the strongest in my class by far, but I was constantly inspired and I was willing to work hard to keep up. I also learned that college is one of those architecture, is one of those careers you only do if you're passionate about. So I think when we started, our freshman class was about 60 students in the program. And by the end of 5 years, we were down to less than 30. So it's because it's so intense and because you have to have this passion for it. People just thought, oh yeah, I'd like to be an architect. And then they actually saw what it entailed and realized that it wasn't for them. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. One opportunity that I had at RPI, was a study abroad program. I wanted to mention this because I always thought it would be great to do the study abroad, and I actually did, which was really, I have to say, pretty life-changing in a lot of ways, because I went to Rome in Italy, and I found that I really just grew as a person, because I learned a lot about my identity being in this place, this foreign place, and I learned a lot about just being an architect and just noticing the world around me, and it was a pretty amazing experience. And so I want to just say, if you ever have the opportunity and the interest, that pursuing a study abroad is definitely something that I would recommend. In between years of college, in between those 5 years, I had summers off. So what I did with them is I wanted to find jobs related in the field. So that first summer, I got a job at an economic development company. So I wasn't able to get a job at an architecture firm because I had literally no experience. And I was able to find this economic development company that was redoing a bunch of buildings at an old Air Force base in upstate New York. So it was kind of great because I had a mentor there and someone that wanted me to learn as much as I could. He loved the idea that he had this architecture student on staff, and I got to experience a lot of real life things, right? So I got to experience meetings with like architects, other like actual architects, with contractors, with subcontractors, and it was a different experience because I was actually on the client side. So this company was actually hiring these people to do work for them. So even though, it wasn't an ideal architecture job where I got to like be super creative and do a lot of fun stuff, it was still incredibly educational, and it actually helped me get to the next internship the following summer. So that following summer, I got this job at this tiny 3-person firm in upstate New York, and I got practice with drawing, with doing some computer drawing. I got practice with, being parts of meetings with clients and engineers. And I just kind of saw how a small office is run. And then on top of that, it was another stepping stone to a slightly better or slightly bigger firm the next year. And that firm was like 20 people. And I even got more experience and got to do a lot of different variety of things, which was great, and join different project teams and help them out with their different tasks. So that was pretty cool. And then when I was in my 4th year of college, it was coming up to my last summer before graduating. And our school was actually having a job fair. And I wasn't really interested in attending because, I didn't think any of the firms that would be there would have work that I'd be interested in. But, I just mustered up the motivation to go. And I frankly really am glad that I did, because I met some folks from a firm called Boland Swinsky Jackson. I saw that they had really interesting work, and they had 5 offices, one of which is in San Francisco. And at the time, my brother lived in San Francisco, and he had invited me to live with him for the summer. And so I managed to somehow impress the architects from BCJ enough that they put me in touch with the managing partner in San Francisco, and I sent some work samples, had a phone interview, and then before I knew it, I was living in San Francisco for the summer. So this was pretty life-changing for me, as you can guess, because I loved it there. And a colleague, from day one, he really took me under his wing. He taught me not only practical skills, but collaborative skills. So I got to work directly with clients. I got direct feedback from Peter Bolin, who is one of the founding partners of the firm. And, it was really, and on top of that, it was really my first chance at having the ability, basically my first chance of showing off a little bit of creativity and having my voice heard. Not showing it off, but actually getting to do some stuff that I came up with myself. And so they offered me a full-time position after college. And I pretty much just couldn't refuse, because this was a great job. San Francisco is a great city. So, and fast forward 11 and a half years, and I'm still at the same firm, and I'm pretty happy. And it's pretty much shaped much of who I am as an architect to this day. So then just talking about the job a little bit. So like Hathel said in the beginning, and you can see in my bio, I've worked on a number of projects, all different types of projects, sizes and scales, and different clients. And I've worked with different project teams, pretty amazing, inspiring project teams like structural engineers who are the best in the world for some of these Apple stores. I've worked on a lot of high-profile Apple stores. And I wanted to just reiterate the importance of really always feeling like you're learning. So for example, I have been working for, like I said, over 11 years, and I've never worked on any project with any sort of food service element. And that's totally fine. And I could easily go through life without having ever done that. But now I'm doing that, in that I'm working on 3 coffee shops that have some smaller food service element. And I'm learning a ton about health codes and about the requirements for all the coffee shop equipment. about the way people use the space. There's some similarities with an Apple store because there's like front of house where customers are, there's back of house where the employees kind of get everything done. So it's just really interesting. One of the things that I really love about this job is that I am always having opportunities to feel like I'm learning, which is really great. So let's see. So here are just some images of some of the projects that I found to be the most satisfying, or just, my favorite things about projects. And so this was an Apple store in London, in Covent Garden, and this opened up in 2010, and it's pretty unique because it's in this historically protected building with all this like antique brick and just all these really amazing details that are both amazing and incredibly challenging to work with, because it's not a blank slate and you're really trying to create something special in something that's existing. So this is one of those moments where we inserted this very modern glass stair that very much has this Apple aesthetic to it. Although Apple's aesthetic has changed a little bit in the past few years, but everything evolves. So this is studies, and on the left is a sketch I had done of what this spiral staircase could look like in the existing building, and how it kind of interacts and interfaces with the existing space. And a few more images from that project. There are a lot of different, I guess, rooms and different parts of it. So in the center, there's this courtyard with this giant skylight above it. This was a pretty amazing experience because I got to work directly with these incredible structural engineers that were, in collaboration with us, were able to figure out this very thin and lightweight structure for this gigantic glass skylight. And then I got to work directly with the people who built it, in that I would go to their shop and make sure that we were all on the same page in terms of the final output. So it's incredibly satisfying, a really nice experience, and I learned a ton. So yeah, this Apple store at the time was really different from what we had been doing before, where it had all this exposed ductwork, and so it's just a lot of things that I had never really thought about before that I got to really dig my mind into, which is great. Here's another image of there's a back glass staircase in this this area that actually used to be exterior, and we've closed it off with a skylight on top and created this like floating, super delicate glass staircase in the back. And then more recently, in the past few years, I worked on this single family house for clients in the Bay Area. And this was a pretty amazing experience because it was the first time I really managed a project. And I was the go-to person for everything. And I was drawing, and I was organizing, I was doing some of the financial work, I was staffing things up and directly communicating with clients, directly communicating with the contractors, and our managing partner who would assist in certain elements. So this was a really great project because I got to work on it, for me, as in terms of a learning experience. I got to work on it from the very beginning, from the very initial conceptual sketches to the very end, until the family moved in. And to this day, I have a really great relationship with them, and I've taken my family there to see the house, and it's really satisfying. Actually, it's a good reminder as to why I wanted to be an architect to begin with. It's when you work on a house for a client, you really learn a lot about them, and a lot about how they use space, and what they want and what their ideals are. So this was a great project. And here are just some more information about it. Like there's a floor plan and a section just to get an idea. So these are actually presentation drawings that we put together. So there's a lot of information here that wouldn't be, say, in like a construction document set. So a construction document set would have it's usually like a thick book and of drawings, and it's a very large, thick book of drawings, and it has details from, it has drawings from like what the ceiling should look like and where all the lights should be and where all the smoke detectors should be, to details of what does like the transition of a wall to the floor look like? What exactly does that look like? And is there a reveal, and how big is that reveal? And I can talk for hours about all these kinds of details, but I won't bore you anymore. So this was like, a general idea of how the house was kind of laid out. And we even worked with a landscape architect on this project. So I learned a bunch of stuff about that, which I hadn't known before. And they were really good. And I just, one of the things I love about this practice, or this profession, is if you keep your mind open and you look around at you, you can be inspired by, or if you look around you, you can be inspired by pretty much anything. And so here are just a few more images of this project. So it's a living space, dining space, and then they have this giant outdoor patio with this huge floating roof that passed over an outdoor dining table. Let's see. This was a view from their master bedroom, and they had a little private deck off of that, and a little floating bench inside, and this very beautiful glass pop out that we designed for them. On the right is a picture of their soaking tub that was like a custom precast concrete tub that we drew, we designed, we detailed, and then we worked directly with local concrete manufacturer to build that. And then I also got to do kind of fun things like this for that project. So the client wanted a very large table for dining. And, this is something that I guess we could have gone out and tried to find something to buy, to help them buy. But they were interested in doing something custom. And, we were super excited about the idea of that. So what actually happened was we went to a store that sold these live edge tabletops that were basically just a cut through an entire tree. And we picked this one. And this is a piece of Claro walnut, which is a California walnut. And we worked with the people at that shop to develop this design of this space, and then they basically just built it. And I even got to go to their shop and check their details and check their progress and make sure that everything they were doing was going in the right direction. So yeah, things, even like small kind of side projects like this, are really fun and satisfying. And I also just wanted to talk about, like, one of the best parts about being an architect is seeing something that you've designed, seeing it built. So this is actually not a photograph. This is a rendering that one of my colleagues helped us create. So this was done by a computer with lots of work, and it was before anything was ever built. It was actually before we even had our construction documents done. It was during a time we were just designing things and trying to make sure the client was happy with where we were going. So I wanted to show this because during construction, we tried to take kind of photos from the same angle. So this is that same view, but when just some of the grading was done below the structural pad, and some of the granite was put down. And so let's see. This was when waterproofing was put down, and then the rebar was put down. And now the structural slab was being poured and floated. And so you can see a tiny bit of that rebar still poking through. But this is like, again, looking down that same view. So now structural steel has come in and is being, welded together and installed properly. And then more structural steel. To achieve this house, we had a lot of structure. And then we have the wood framing started to come in for the walls. And all of this, all of the one of the parts of what we do for our job is we coordinate all the different disciplines. So we make sure that plumbing lines, electrical lines, mechanical lines, everything is put with intention and is placed in a way that won't disrupt the architecture. And sometimes we have to adjust the architecture to make these things work, but it's all part of the process and it's all part of the coordination. And it's all a challenge, and it's all, in my mind, really fun because you're just solving problems. And I like to think about things that way. So then this is when the roof framing started to coming in. The framing above is engineered wood rafters, and like even here you can see like there's an orange line and a few other pipes, and those are sprinkler lines and different types of things that we needed that were very carefully decided upon. Even the holes that are put into those rafters were designed by a structural engineer to make sure that they wouldn't affect the ability of those rafters to hold up what they needed to hold up. So yeah, and then in this image, like that kind of wooden wall that you see in the foreground is actually formwork for a concrete spine wall that we had designed, and the spine wall actually has a fireplace in it as well. And so this is more formwork that you can see, and all this time, different trades from the contractor are coming in and working on things. And this is when the concrete was curing. When the concrete was aired out, and so we could see that little notch there is where the fireplace eventually went. Just some more images. A lot of things had to get protected during construction. This is when, let's see, yeah, the windows came in at this point. Windows were installed. At this point, we had a topping a topping concrete slab that was the floor. And so that's what wasn't being installed here over radiant tubing for heating. And then this was when the topping slab was ground to a smooth polish. And this is pretty much what the house looks like today, with all the furniture installed, with all the finishes done, with all the books on the bookshelves. So yeah, I look at this and I feel incredibly satisfied for what we did to get to this place. And then, like I mentioned, more recently, I've been working on coffee shops, and so this is just an example of something that we might do in a design phase of a project where, I'm taking the space and I'm drawing different options of what the layout could be like, and then presenting it to a client along with supporting drawings and like supporting plans and sections and even photographs, so everyone kind of has a sense of what could this actually look like. One thing I wanted to mention was, you may or may not know this, but architecture is very much a male-dominated field at this time. It's definitely getting better, and you see a lot more women running firms, a lot more women in positions of power at firms, but there's still a long way to go. And I wanted to mention this because, being a woman, you may be treated lesser, you may be questioned more, but I think it's a good reminder that you shouldn't take crap from people who try to box you into sexist gender roles. I've been asked too many times if I'd answer the phone or get someone's coffee. I've gone to construction sites where I'm the one running a meeting and then I'm offered a pink hard hat just because I'm a woman. It's pretty annoying. It's not a huge deal, but it's pretty annoying. And then, like I said, I'm questioned even when decisions need to be made. My answers are sometimes questioned. But like I said, having confidence and knowing that everything that basically knowing your strengths helps a lot. And remembering that you shouldn't just fall into these typical gender roles or sexist roles. Now we're getting towards the end a little bit. Just some additional advice to anyone who is considering architecture as a career path. Get as much exposure as you can. So I didn't have the opportunity to do this in my high school, but I know a lot of high schools have drafting classes. And I think that's great because then you can think about because a huge part of architecture is drafting and drawing designs to get ideas across and to make sure that you're giving people instructions of how to build, and also being able to convey design ideas to clients and to other architects like your team. Also take art classes, because then you can get into the idea of what are you as a creative person. Speak to your guidance counselor, learn about local opportunities. Like I did, I work hard, apply for scholarships, and that'll give you, hopefully, open up some more doors to better colleges. Some of this advice obviously goes to any profession that you'd be interested in. Something that so one program that we have that architects and I guess have whatever is for high school students is a program called the ACE Mentor Program, and so ACE stands for Architecture, Construction, and Engineering. And it's basically students and industry professionals working together and emulating a design team. You work on a project and you act as if it's a real project, and it's you learn a ton, right? So it's a hands-on experience. It spans a full year. I don't remember exactly what the commitment is. So there's also field trips and opportunities to apply for scholarships and grants. And the website is acementor.org. You can just type this into Google and you'll find it. Even doing something as simple as Habitat for Humanity, I think, is really helpful, because one of the things about being an architect is trying to understand how things are built. And I think Habitat for Humanity helps you with that, because you're actually in there doing stuff. Or, just even working for a contractor. And then, like I had mentioned before, the importance of going to job fairs. And just talking to people, doing independent research. One thing I've really learned is don't underestimate even the seemingly smallest opportunities. And that's really it. That is pretty much it. And if anybody has any questions for me, you can ask now, or feel free to just email me directly. I have my email address there, and also the name of my firm is Boland Swinsky Jackson, and you can check out our work at the website there. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Priya. Yes, and if we can actually, we'll leave that up for a little bit before we introduce the next speaker. So if we do have any questions, this is the time to ask now. You can ask your questions in the chat room. If anyone's asking questions on Facebook as well, we can monitor those questions. So do ask questions on either platform. I'd like to talk a little bit about the diversity in your experience, and given that you've been deliberate in the kinds of projects that you've taken up. So why is that? And then if we're talking about if our focus is someone who's just starting out, is it important that they should diversify their interests even when they're starting out, or should they keep a focus, and for how long before you move to the next project?
That's a really great question. I think it depends on the person, partially. And I'll just tell you from my perspective, like I said, I think it's incredibly important to feel like you're learning all the time. And part of that is working on different types of projects. You don't always get the opportunity to work on different types of projects, because a firm, like anything, is a business. And in the end, they need to make sure that, if everyone wants to work on the cool coffee shops, that doesn't actually work, because there's only a certain budget for them. And, it's not always realistic to say you get to work on whatever you want, because you're balancing staffing, you're balancing what other people are doing, you're balancing I just finished a project, so now I'm free. What should I work on? And if that happens to be another project that's exactly the same as the last one, then that's what it is. So it's not always easy, but definitely you have to be your own advocate and have advocates for you in the firm that I've learned. And depending on your personality and depending on your managing partners and all of that, it does make sense to speak up for yourself if you're unhappy or feel like you're not learning. What was the other part of your question? Oh, as a person starting out.
Mm-hmm.
As a person starting out, yeah. So when I first started out, I worked on just helping out a college building, and it wasn't like start to finish or anything like that I was involved, but it was good. And then soon after that, I started working on Apple stores. And my really big advice there is just to make sure when you're starting out that you're feeling fulfilled in terms of what you're learning, and you're not just doing the same task over and over and over again or being treated like an intern. You should actually be doing things that are meaningful, things where you're actually adding value. And in that case, and the other side of that is also the intern development program hours that you're supposed to earn if you want to be a licensed architect. And so that itself, part of that requirement is to have a mix of experience, is to have experience in different parts of projects. So you have to earn a number of hours in, say, construction administration, and a number of hours in dealing with budgets. And so in some ways that actually kind of helps you get the variety of experience and continue to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to that. And actually, I wanted to follow up a little bit further about some of our girls and, young women who are starting out in architecture and getting to understand the field. I mean, it can be quite daunting in any male-dominated field. I didn't even know that pink hard hats existed. So what do you typically do in response, and how can you try to maybe change the field in the future? How can our girls start now in order to get towards more gender parity in architecture?
I think with anything, just making sure that you speak up for yourself. As silly as it sounds, when I've been offered those pink hard hats, I refuse to wear them. I just tell the contractor that pink is not my color, which I clearly like pink. I'm wearing a pink shirt right now, but that's just how I deal with it. And for whatever it's worth, in some ways it helps people just get out of their assumptions and remember that, I'm a professional and they should respect me. I've been lucky in that I've had very good colleagues who've also helped support me. So not only do I speak up for myself, I've had situations where colleagues have also supported me. I've had contractors question my abilities and constantly ask my colleague, like on that project where I managed the project, the general contractor kept asking my colleague, who's a man, all the questions, kept calling him, kept emailing him, all the questions. And I was very frustrated with this. And my colleague, who is also a friend, which I'm pretty lucky about, he basically just kept telling the general contractor, I think this is the answer, but let's check with Priya. And I think that helped really reiterate the fact that, I'm the one who they should be asking questions to. I wish I had better answers, and I wish I had like a bullseye with this, but the reality is this is all a work in progress for all women in pretty much all fields. And there is some really amazing work that's happening right now with architects because women in architecture has not always been a focus because it's been so male dominated. But now there's groups like the American Institute of Architecture has, it's pretty great actually. There's a group called Equity by Design, and it's run by a woman who actually used to be one of my colleagues. And she's very inspirational, and something that they've been doing as a group is every year they've been conducting giant surveys, like national surveys, of finding out where the inequities in architecture really lie. And just talking about like the fact that in architecture school at this point, you'll see the ratio of men to women to about 50-50. It'll be about half and half. But then when you think of licensed architects, so people that have actually done, checked all those boxes about getting the hours and taking all of the exams, it's a ridiculous disparity where there's so many more men who have licenses than women. And a lot of women, once they have families, are dropping out of the profession because they don't have the support and the flexibility from their jobs. But like I said, good things are starting to happen. I'll tell you my experience. I've had 2 kids, and both times I've taken 6 months off after having the kids. And this is partly because, I've been at this firm for so many years and they value me, but it's also partly because they're realizing that they don't want to lose talented women. And if they don't provide that flexibility or that understanding or the support of families, then they're going to lose a lot of talented people, both women and men. So there's still disparities, of course, but we're working towards making it more equal. And hopefully by the time the girls who are watching this get into the profession and get into this, it'll be that much better.
Agreed. And that's what we're trying to do here at Speak Mentorship, is to give the girls the agency to realize, how to continue on in the profession despite having personal goals as well, which are also just as equally important. I do want to ask the question that Crystal asked. I really like English. I'm looking for a career related to that, but I get discouraged when I don't do as well as others in that subject. Do you have any advice on how to deal with that? And I mean, that really brings us back to perhaps, imposter syndrome and not having enough individuals to really encourage you and support you to keep going, because we often think that it's just we're not good enough because we only see successful people, quote unquote. Right. And the most important thing, and we'd like to hear from you, what's the most important thing to realize that, you're also equally successful? How do you mark those accomplishments down?
I mean, I think about when I was in college, and, I would work just as hard as the next person, and things would just come easier to them. And professors would definitely praise them more. And I knew I had strengths, and pretty much when I realized that I couldn't compare myself with all those people, I needed to find my own level of success. I just focused on my own strengths. I focused on what I needed to develop and what I needed to work on as well, and try to basically, I worked with professors. I had a lot of peer mentorship that I would, in college, you have a lot of friends, especially in architecture school, and maybe in a major like English, where there's a lot of back and forth with friends and other students. So I would say, just to keep working hard and just figure out, what are your strengths? Where are the areas that you do need to work on, and work on those. Focus on that. Did I answer that question okay? Is that right?
Yeah. And to add to that, really what we want girls in our larger audience, beyond the girls who are in Speak, to understand is that, this occurs to most everybody. I think every individual at some point feels like they're not good enough, or somebody's just better than them. And the most important thing to realize is, if you write down your accomplishments, if you meet the right support group, which Priya, you had mentioned, just, having the right support allows for you to, kind of understand what's next and really getting to know yourself better, then success is going to come, regardless of how it comes or what you identify it as. You're going to be successful if you just keep surrounding yourself by positive support groups, and just keep heading for whatever task is next, and just doing great at it.
One thing I wanted to add too is that, like I said, sometimes you see the person next to you and they seem to be doing so much better, but the thing we don't realize is that they're going through their own stuff too. And even though it might look easier for them, it might not be. It might be like really difficult for them as well, especially in a field that's creative and subjective. It's you question yourself a lot. And I think, even though it's like that saying, grass is always greener on the other side, even though things may look right and rosy and great with these other folks, they're not necessarily a bar you should compare yourself with. And it's really about your own self-development, about your own self-growth, and about, like Hazel said, supporting people that recognize that.
Mm-hmm. And I think, this generation has it a lot more it's more difficult for them given how much they do post about the surface, the superficial. Everyone's happy, on Instagram. It's not whatever. I'm not very social media savvy, but it seems like everyone's happy, everyone's doing well. But what's behind that is the most important thing. So, Crystal, to answer your question, it's great to look at what others are doing, but more importantly, it's also, just reflect inwards and see if what you're doing is what you want to be doing. And I think success will come regardless of what you or how you're comparing yourself with other people. So it seems like everyone's got it together, but I don't know if that's the case, or I'm pretty sure we can say that that's not the case. And now we, I think that actually brings us really good transition into our next speaker for March is Dr. Miriam Durrani, who will be speaking a lot on the work she does as a professor in, largely around sociology and with populations that are marginalized. So again, what does it mean to really bring out these voices and make sure that everyone feels empowered and that they have the agency to realize, that I too belong here, and furthermore, that I too am successful. So thank you very much, Priya. We appreciate you taking the time with us today. I know that our Speak Girls who are watching on Facebook, Instagram, and here, I know a couple of people joined us across platforms. Appreciate the time that you've taken. So thank you for that.
Great. Yeah, thanks for this opportunity too. It's great.
Perfect. And we hope everyone has a lovely rest of the day. Bye.
Bye.